team makes day 2. Mono Red Aggro versus Esper Control over on Standard. Jeskai versus Azorius on Modern. It's a Colonnade Mirror. Grixis Control v Miracles in Legacy. I expect this round to have... This one's going to go a while.
Yeah. This should be our fastest match of the lot.
Austin Collins on the draw will swing in with Fanatical Firebrand. So on Rossum's side, what are we looking at for early removal to help manage this?
3 copies of Cast Down, 3 copies of Moment Engraving on the early turns, also leaving up a couple Essence Scatters, seeing as Fanatical Firebrand not the most threatening creature. You can start. You can use 3 Syncopates as well. He'll be leaving up on these turns, and then not too much spot removal really. He starts leaving up Sinister Sabotage on 3, and then casting Vraska's Contempts on 4.
Swinging for Austin with the Firebrand. That's going to be left around. He goes for the G2 Lava Runner, and that gets cast down. Austin will take the chance to just shock Rossum here, though, down to 16, hits him to 15.
And when you see these lands, you know that's where the shock is going.
Yeah. And at the ready, Rossum's Curve, he Essence Scatters a Runaway Steamkin. I do like how many answers to creatures he has at 1 and 2 as he eats another shock. You know, he's got Moment of Craving, Cast Down, Syncopate, and Essence Scatter. That's 11 cards that can interact early on.
Right. He also has 3 Ritual of Soots if the battlefield does get out of hand.
Rossum with Watery Grave going to shock here. That's a big one. We see Lightning Strike Rossum down to 7.
Feels like shocking from here. It has to be Vraska's Contempt.
Yeah, swing with Fanatical Firebrand. Rossum goes to 6. And now we will see that's the card. And it'd be by Sinister Sabotage for sure. Experimental Frenzy by Austin. And yes, you should be concerned about that one.
Oh, yeah. Got to answer that right away.
Vraska's Contempt from Rossum brings him back up to 8, and he plays a tap land. Hoping Austin does not have another Frenzy, but he does. 2 copies in the main. Here it is.
Here's a check for a Teferi, because you got to get that enchantment off the table.
Yeah, I mean, in Rossum, I understand trying to fade it. This is going to go ahead and draw 2. There's only 2 copies in the main of this. And he'd already countered 1, but it's a runaway of a card.
Ha ha. That's the name of the elemental creature.
Risk Factor from Austin, and John has no choice but to say, yeah, draw 3.
Yeah, you let the player that can't play spells from their hand draw 3 cards, though you just still need to answer the Frenzy, so inevitably Colin should have access to those cards.
Austin's hand has multiple Lightning Strikes here. As soon as he breaks this Experimental Frenzy, it's going to be good. Here's Wizard's Lightning.
He's just going to wait for Rossum to break it. Rossum either answers it or just loses to Colin's drawing 3 or 4 cards a turn.
Yeah, draws a land. What do we have for life gain on Rossum's side? I'm talking about big life gain.
You came to the wrong deck list.
No.
He can gain it 2 at a time with Moment of Cravings and Vraska's Contempts.
That's not going to be enough. He's going to jumpstart his draw 2.
On the sideboard, he has a couple copies of Vona, Butcher of Magan. That's a big deal in this matchup.
Austin plays a land, top card. Is it anything relevant? See, Austin's got 6 cards in hand. And this is just such an interesting game plan, Experimental Frenzy. Their hand balloons up with cards as they draw cards. And Austin will crack the Frenzy on end step. Watch out. That means he's got some lethal burn. Goes for Lightning Strike. That would put John down to 2. Probably can't let that one happen. He will Syncopate for 1. I like that one quite a bit.
Yeah, the Syncopate's not about to get better.
I mean, you have to assume, right, if Austin can't lethally burn here, then he's made a big mistake.
Right. You got to figure there's a good mix of creatures and burn spells in that hand from here.
Lightning Strike again, trying to send John down to 2. That one's going to work. Okay, here's Shock. That'll put John on a counterspell or bust. He will have to Sinister Sabotage the Shock.
Doesn't feel great, but better than losing the game.
G2 Lava Runner could be lethal here. Another Shock could be lethal here. A lot of stuff you could like on Austin's side.
You would hope for a Shock over Lava Runner because Lava Runner plays into a potential Moment of Craving.
Lava Runner, Moment of Craving. He gains 2. John to 4. I mean, Coach should be clear on Shock. Here's the Flamekin, and Austin did not succeed in burning out. And that's big.
Yeah, and that sequencing on Collins' part, I'm a little curious about. Would be pretty inclined to start with the Steamkin, though it seems like he was convinced that he had the game locked up.
Ritual of Soot takes care of the Steamkin. All right, we see another risk factor.
Can't take 4.
No, but he'll Sinister Sabotage it. He doesn't want to let Austin get 3 more cards. He can start jump-starting these, which he will. Jumpstart discarding a land. That's going to work. Here's 3 more cards for Austin. We see a Phoenix. Looks like a Pyromancer and a Lava Runner. So he'll cast Lava Runner, swing in for 2. John down to 2 again.
Yeah, that Lava Runner was a big deal. It's tough to imagine Rossum getting out of this one from here.
Teferi. Yeah, I mean, there's a Pyromancer in Austin's hand that will be lethal. So Rossum needs a removal spell and a counter spell. Well, here's Moment of Craving. He goes to 4.
I think that was a cast down, actually.
A cast down. That's not going to work then. Does he have the counter spell? No, he does not. Close. Close on Rossum's side. Well, I don't know. I guess there was another risk factor in Austin's yard. Maybe not close.
Yeah, I mean, Rossum really needed the Teferi the turn after Collins landed the second Frenzy. When that came down, he just needed to get it off the table right away.
Card hugely difficult to beat from the Esper side.
And really any deck in Standard whatsoever.
Well, I guess you could race it. There's maybe some matchups where that's something you can deal with.
Sure.
Reacting to it seems really hard.
Yeah.
So game 1 goes to Austin Collins. Experimental Frenzy, taking it with mono red. Not the first time we've said that. Let's look at the sideboards. John Rossum, 3 Duress, 2 Disdainful Stroke, 2 Fungal Infection, 2 Invoke the Divine, Vona, Butcher of Magan, another Moment of Craving that would bring him up to a full 4, a First Negate, a Profane Procession, and the Eldest Reborn. Some good weapons here.
Yeah, the 4th Moment of Craving is a pretty big deal. I like the 2 Fungal Infection. Sometimes you can actually just catch a 1-2 get to Lava Runner with that, which is pretty nice. Most of the rest of the stuff I don't love. The 2 Vonas are nice. It's notable that he's playing Vona instead of Lyra because white is his 3rd color.
Yeah.
It's way easier to cast for his deck. And I actually don't mind a copy or 2 of Invoke the Divine because of how important Experimental Frenzy is in the matchup.
Yeah, I assume that Vona, it comes in because it's in this matchup. You know, if it's not for this matchup, what is it for? I want to ask you Invoke the Divine versus Disdainful Stroke because both of them can answer our Experimental Frenzy. Disdainful Stroke could hit a Rekindling Phoenix. But it doesn't gain life, and it doesn't answer Frenzy once it's on the board.
I think it's less about that and more about the fact that Rossum's deck has a much higher mana curve, and Austin's going to come out swinging. So Rossum's going to have his mana taxed in a way where it's not always easy to leave up a counter spell.
Okay.
That's exactly what the problem was in Game 1, right? He had to take the shields down, Collins cast a second Frenzy, and then the game had functionally ended.
Yeah, there was a Sinister Sabotage in Rossum's hand when the Frenzy was cast.
Right.
So Invoked would help there. We'll go over Austin Collins' deck for the sideboard here in just a minute after this word from Ultimate Guard. Back here, still Austin Collins. That's the only match with Game 1. We look over at his sideboard. He's got some removal, Cannonades and Lava Coils, and Fight with Fires. Might see a Fight with Fire to answer Vona. He has Legion War Boss, Rekindling Phoenix, Banefire, Mountain, and then the 4th copy of Risk Factor.
Risk Factor was pretty good in Game 1. I wouldn't mind more copies of that effect. Your opponent's heavily interacting with you, and that card is worth 2 cards if it's just, 2 copies of Flame Rift or whatever, and if you get to draw extra cards, that's great. Banefire against the Counterspell deck. There's a lot to like there, though you generally prefer it against Settle the Wreckage decks over this deck that's just full of 1-for-1 removal. I do like the Fight with Fires a good amount. Leader of Dawnbringer is probably the card on the radar, but it still hits Vona anyway. And I don't mind Rekindling Phoenix here. And if you're reaching for this much big stuff, you might see the extra mountain as well.
Yeah.
The Phoenix kind of forces like a counterspell or a Vraska's Contempt, which is different than the rest of the stuff that your other threats ask for.
So Lava Coil does hit Vona. Do you think Austin knows, because it's Esper, that Rossum would be boarding in Vona, or do you think Fight with Fire because it could always be Lyra?
I think it's just Fight with Fire because it could always be Lyra, and I don't really know that I would want more than 2 of that effect, even if I knew about Vona.
Okay. It's not great.
Yeah, push comes to shove, you can just cast 2 shocks. I mean, it doesn't feel good, but there's only so many Vonas possibly in Rossum's deck. If you saw a lot of them,
yeah,
that changes the equation.
I do like how Rossum played that last game too. He exposed his really the only card that could beat him there. It felt like was the second Frenzy. He knows enough about the format that he's already countered 1. You got to feel pretty safe in dodging the second. And even then, Rossum fought.
Yep, and he was still very much alive to just drawing Teferi on that turn and probably winning the game.
Yeah. Austin Collins mulliganing to 6 here for our second game.
His life total was in a precarious spot when he tapped out for that Contempt anyway, so. Once you go down to 6, there's a number of combinations of 2 cards that just lethal you.
What I think is interesting, when we look at that last game, and I don't know, is the play patterns on Experimental Frenzy is when to actually sacrifice it.
Almost never.
Well, yeah, so that's an interesting take, right? Never, the idea of I'll never sacrifice it, I'll make my opponent remove it, and then just never play my cards, that might be the right answer.
Yeah.
At the same time, Austin at some point sacrificed it himself because he just had so many lethal burn spells in his hand, that this has got to be better. Lightning Strike upstairs from 20. It's the first play from Austin Collins. What a deck.
Got to get something going. There's a very real chance that Collins is just off of all of the little creatures in the deck because he's seeing multiple copies of
Moment of Craving.
And that is the cast downs as well.
Yeah.
And he's just going on that extra land.
If it's all burn and no creatures, then Rossum can't even gain life.
I'd expect at least the Rekindling Phoenixes.
How about another Lightning Strike? John Rossum down to 14. I hope we just do 20 with only instants and sorceries.
This deck does that sometimes. Okay, I do spot a Lava Runner in the hand.
Yeah, and he didn't cast it despite 2 instants in the yard. He sees 4 mana up and says, nah, I'm good.
Yeah, he's just waiting to cast a bunch of things like that on the same turn.
I like that from Austin. Now, that did give Rossum a chance to cast Chemister's Insight.
Yeah, I mean, Collins has gotten in some chip shots, but it's a long road ahead.
Teferi from Rossum. It's at 14, figures safe enough. He'll plus it, draw the card, and untap. Well, he'll say go. Let's see how much burn he takes. Untaps too. Austin, is he going to spend the mana? Here's another Lightning Strike. We'll see where it goes. Yeah, upstairs, 11.
Yeah, I'm not trying to deal 25 damage this game.
Once you start playing your second Lightning Strike that way, that's how they're all going to be played.
Right.
Fifth Mountain says go. Rossum, what a game.
Yeah, with this being where we're at, I'm not feeling great about all those early Lightning Strikes.
And, there's a chance, though. What if Austin's played this matchup and actually believes this is the way to play it, right? There's no quick win.
You do want to empty your hand if the plan is resolving Experimental Frenzy. I'm just not sure how likely he is to resolve that spell.
No, I mean, alternatively, this does deny all of Rossum's life gain, right?
No, I'm fine with the not casting the creature.
Okay.
It's the casting of the Lightning Strikes.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll see how it shakes out. It feels like Collins is in a losing position.
Yeah. Discarding to hand size. Another Chemister's Insight on step for Rossum. And now we'll see Risk Factor from Austin.
think Collins has drawn his sideboard Banefire, though.
Yeah, Rossum's down to 7 here. He took 4 off that risk factor.
One more land, and Collins can make that uncounterable for 5.
Yeah, can he... I guess there's nothing like commit in the format anymore. Does Rossum have a play?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Rossum just continues to discard the hand size here. Yeah, I think Collins has assembled some lethal burn. Close, he passes. He actually missed a lander up there, which is pretty...
Yeah, it's not
poor.
surprising, but he would like to make them.
Another Chemister's Insight from Rossum. And now Wizard's Lightning from Austin Collins. That will be Sinister Sabotaged. But this means there's an opportunity. We'll see where we're at. No, Rossum's going to tap. You can't get the Lava Run in there yet.
Rossum would love to get Vona down on this turn. Alternatively, if he gets to the next turn with the Fairy at 8, leaves up a couple of counter spells here, and just gets the emblem, he'll be able to push Collins off of ever casting the uncounterable Banefire.
Yeah, he discards the cast down. He's got 1 Chemister's Insight in the yard. So the question is, I guess, how many exile effects he immediately has. So he can make it. He can immediately exile 2 lands. And maybe more. He doesn't actually have too much straight card draw. You know, there's nothing, like X draw for X where you just immediately get all your opponent's permanents. Here's Goblin Chain Whirler. And John Rossum will let it resolve.
I would expect some kind of life gain effect.
Yeah,
there we go.
I was going to say, yeah, he almost wants that on the table.
If he has 2 Moment of Cravings, that's a huge win for Rossum. Oh, wow.
Went down to 6 up to 10.
I was starting to come around on Collins' strategy, but
of never play creatures?
The Teferi at 8 really changed my tune. And then, when Collins took action against that, suddenly he's just losing to these life gain removal spells.
I liked what Austin did here. The never play creature strategy was really close to working, especially with Banefire in his hand. Now, the problem is, I think what you mentioned, is that once Teferi's at 8, the Banefire will never get to be uncounterable. He'll lose the lands. Mm-hmm. So it really fell apart. With more land drops, I could see this working.
And more land drops are honestly just if he never had Guido Lava Run in his deck. I don't know if he can sideboard in a way to move totally off of creatures.
Yeah.
But the way he played it would have played really well if that was the case. Drawing creatures was the problem.
Right. Yeah, if he could just draw lightning strikes, this would have worked.
Yep.
Or lands. Now with Teferi looming at 8, Austin's in a pretty rough spot. Most of his creatures, you figure, will run into some removal spell and possibly a removal spell that gains life.
Mm-hmm. He can shove with Banefire for 5, probably at Teferi, but from that point, his Banefire is spent now. He doesn't have a way that is clearly capable of ending the game anymore.
And that's exactly what he's going to do. I think Rossum's side, he could contempt his Teferi in response.
From 10, I think he's not desperate enough. Yeah.
I guess if it was a lethal Banefire, he may make that play. If it was enough to kill a Teferi.
Right.
More lands for Rossum. More pluses for Teferi. This seems all good. He's discarding Chemister's Insights. Collins still doesn't want to play creatures. And so we know how that ends up. Teferi back to 5. Search for Escanta for John. Because of all the burnouts in his deck, I don't feel like a Teferi emblem is very likely. Eventually, John Rossum will just find either his Chromium or his Vona and win it that way.
Right. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to see Chromium boarded out in this matchup. 7 is a pretty big ask.
Risk factor from Collins. That's going to be hit by Syncopate. And untaps 2 lands from Teferi.
Syncopate on the front side of risk factor is a big deal. That's a counterspell that exiles.
Awesome, just hoping that something sticks. Invoke the Divine has been boarded in, and Search for Escanta will transform into Escanta. We have right now. Kind of just hanging out on Rossum's side. He can use that search to find more life gain. I guess he can't find the win con with it, right? Unless the win con is Teferi again.
I mean, you can't find Vona, but he's getting dangerously close to a Teferi ultimate as it is. Right, now he finally gets to leverage that Invoke the Divine.
Yeah, I guess Teferi Emblem is looming at some point. Or at the very least, it'll start forcing some action on Austin to start launching burn spells upstairs. That same one has made its way back up to 8. This is the one that Austin Bane fired 5 turns ago.
It was a desperate play then, and this is just kind of where that was logically going.
Yeah. Another land for Collins. We have some other game 1s here. Miracles. Lawrence Harmon takes game 1 over Donegan. However, Kazu Negri in the Colonnade Mirror takes game 1. So some split results.
And this one's going to 3. Collins has seen enough. He's going to go back to the sideboard here. He managed to get through all of game 2 without seeing those copies of Vona. Though you got to figure that Lyra's still on his radar.
Right, so because Rossum didn't have to show the win con, I don't know if Collins can know exactly what removal spells he needs for it. It's pretty interchangeable.
Right. Like, the downside of Fight with Fire relative to Lava Coil is, I think, negligible. If you just knew that Vona was the card, then sure. Lava Coil does line up better. But just the hedge that Fight with Fire gives you, I think, is well worth the cost. It's not entirely out of the question that the Fight with Fire gets kicked as well. It would have to likely be off the back of Runaway Steamkin, because Rossum's not playing a Settle the Wreckage deck. But the Steamkin makes a lot of mana, especially if you have 2 of them.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, with that all burn, no creature strategy by Austin, how much do you feel like that's how he drew it up versus a strange thing that his hand forced him into?
It looked way more like the second one, especially when he started drawing Steamkins and he drew the Lava Runner.
Yeah.
It felt like this plan was a little incongruent.
It was pretty interesting. He actually got Rossum fairly low doing this. With the Banefire in hand, it could have worked.
The Banefire, I think, made it look better than it was.
Yeah, I agree. It's not great.
Because when you're playing a deck that's full of counterspells and some life gain effects, when your opponent starts lava spiking you, and you don't lose the game, every lava spike that they cast was functionally countered. You just gained that much card advantage.
Yeah. Yeah, the only life point that mattered is the last one. So
exactly.
You don't get it, your cards didn't do anything.
Right.
I can buy into that. So all around on the board, this evens it up at 2 games each for the teams. So expect the standard one looking to conclude first, as all the control mirrors are going into game 2s. And still a pretty interesting matchup between the two. Because all of John Rossum's life gain is attached to spot removal, it's giving Austin a lot of control over the life gain, more than I think Red would normally have.
Right, though that control was in the form of not casting his creature.
Yeah.
Which did not look pretty.
Well, he got to jumpstart risk factor with one of his creatures. I liked that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously he's going to get a lot of creatures at some point.
He had 3 creatures he wanted to jumpstart with.
Yeah.
That was the problem.
Yeah. As they get ready for game 3, a lot over tough talk of new standard here. We're seeing a lot this weekend over at StarCityGames.com. If you want to get caught up, especially after this weekend, there's going to be a lot to read on the StarCityGames.com newsletter. This is written by some of the top pros here on the SCG Tour. every week can be delivered straight to your inbox, free of charge. You get that, upcoming SCG Tour dates, and a lot more. And you can just sign up over at our website, starcitygames.com/newsletter.
It's free. A lot of great stuff in the newsletter, and the price cannot be beat.
And over in Legacy, Dylan Donegan forcing a Game 3 against Lawrence Harmon. And both on 7s for Game 3. And again, from Austin, we see no starts of creatures, but a hand with multiple lightning strikes. Might we see a repeat of Game 1? We'll see.
And there he is. He fires off the lightning strike.
Yeah.
Has a wizard's lightning in hand at the very least.
We're going to go 7 burn spells again.
He does have risk factor. That one's actually pretty good to cast.
And third land and a pass from Rossum, and we will see risk factor from Austin Collins. Will be a great spot for a syncopate from Rossum if he has it. But he does not. He takes 4, goes to 13.
And not having the syncopate, that is a really good side for Collins. With the second spell being risk factor, I like this plan a lot more. Part of the problem in Game 2 is that it was just 2 more lightning strikes after the fact immediately.
So Austin missed the land drop, but end step Wizard's Lightnings. Rossum is down to 10. Still no 4th land for Collins. The thing I liked about the setup from Austin is he had Experimental Frenzy in his hand. When he went for that end step risk factor, he would have loved to see it get syncopated. It gave him a chance to draw land Experimental Frenzy, which would be a much bigger win.
Right.
End step, Rossum's going to try to draw 2. With the spell on the stack, Austin Collins is going to...
Ooh, I like this.
Yeah, he's going to jump start.
Discards Experimental Frenzy because he's got a handful of cards.
Does that draw him over 7? No, it draws him up to 7.
Perfect.
Yeah, that was a really nice line. Now, Rossum.
Ooh, there's Vona.
Okay. We didn't see this the first 2 games. Did Collins show up with an answer?
Well, he's got a fistful of cards.
Yeah.
So he can 2-for-1 himself to get that one off the table, which he's really going to want to do.
Yeah, 4/4 lifelink, so we're not asking too much. We see a pair of shocks up at the front.
Oh, yeah, you just have to.
Oh, yeah, this thing has to be answered. I mean, I guess you don't want to try to block, and you don't want to try to, like, Fanatical Firebrand block Zach. You're not messing around like that.
That's real unnecessarily fancy.
I mean, if it works, it's great. But, you can't do it.
He's got an 8-card hand. Why are we making desperate, weird plays? There we go.
There's 2 shocks. That'll take care of Vona. And here's a creature. It's the Fiaschino Pyromancer. Takes Rossum down to 8. Back to Rossum we go. Finally, Austin has presented a creature. Might it get hit with a removal spell that gains life? We will see.
Does tend to happen.
Fungal Infection is in Rossum's hand. And it looks like that's going to be the card. Which, on Austin's side, at least it didn't gain Rossum life. That's probably fine.
Yeah.
It's funny, I was thinking why we hadn't seen that card see play in Standard before, and then I realized there was this Fatal Push card that's pretty a little good.
You could argue that it was stronger.
Yeah. That card was really good.
Yeah, you'll see that one in the Modern and Legacy seats.
Fanatical Firebrand is from Austin, and he's not going to attack with it. There's a 1/1 there. He wants to also deny life gain, so he'll just leave it there. Rossum draws 2. Does Collins play any burn now? He does not.
Like he does have at least a Steamkin and the 3 cards left over, which is pretty weak in these spots.
Again, his all burn plan has left him a little short.
It seems like Steamkin has not performed in this matchup.
No. Here is Teferi.
Be interested in boarding that one out, I think, if it's possible.
The land. At this point, Rossum spending mana on untapping it. Collins, Lightning Strike, end step. He could have made sure this resolved. This timing's interesting. Right? When there was that end step in Insight. So what do you make of him playing it here? It's almost like he wants to get countered?
It's possible just that the Teferi's new information that changed his plan. If you go to Rossum's turn and he just starts activating that, you'll see largely a repeat of Game 2. He didn't know for sure whether Rossum had it or not. And now that he sees Teferi, he has to be a little bit more aggressive.
It works, so Rossum drops to 5. Love to see a risk factor here.
Love to see a Banefire.
Here's Experimental Frenzy. I think that'll earn a counter spell. It will. Syncopate for 3. Rossum says no. 1 card left in Collins' hand. And just passes.
Just that Steamkin. He does not want to expose that to Vraska's contempt and give Rossum some life he has no business gaining.
We may have seen another Vona picked up for Rossum. That's pretty good if it is. I think it is.
Yeah, mostly looking to dodge Banefire if that's the case, as Collins would be able to cast that for lethal if he had it.
And this is nice. Fungal Infection.
Oh, wow.
Austin shoots it upstairs.
You saw the reaction on Rossum. He's like, me? That means I can Moment of Craving my Sapling token?
Yeah, he's pretty in. Here's Vona. Plays land. John Rossum will untap 2. And if he survives to his next untap, I think Rossum's going to get this.
Oh, yeah. Once you start connecting with Vona, I mean, we're in a situation where Collins had, I suppose now he had +1 mana. Land drop makes it +2 on a lethal Banefire, but Vona quickly pushes him out of range of anything like that. Especially if he finds a counterspell for another Experimental Frenzy. If Collins is able to produce one, that would wrap the game up, and I believe he has one.
And Vona connects. Rossum up to 8. And that's really the hurdle he needed to clear. Behind Teferi on 7, Vona should walk this in.
Oh, yeah.
Austin's going to draw a card. Lava Runner, Flamekin. A draw 2 from Rossum. Got him down to 4, did Austin. He'll pick up the cards. So John Rossum, 2 games to 1, picks up the win. Hoping to get that 7th win for his team. Now he needs one of his teammates. And with that, we'll look over at the Celestial Colonnade decks playing over in Modern. And by look at, we'll inform you that Kazu Negri won the match 2-0. So the team of Dylan Donegan, Kazu Negri, and John Rossum lock up their spot in Day 2. The team of Harmon,